So I think that's kind of what you realize as you have parented a few. Is you're like, if something's a real friendship or real relationship, they're going to find their way back to each other,
That's so good.
and I'm always telling mine, like, don't burn bridges. If people come back into your life, boys and girls, like, if you can possibly just, don't act on every emotion. And I see so many, even kind of young moms sometimes, and like these girls behind me, that they like just, protecting their peace and cutting off friendships, and everybody's toxic. And I tell girls, like, some girls, maybe there is a toxic situation, but you don't have to go announce it.
Hey moms, welcome back to the Gather Moms podcast. We are so excited today because we have someone very special with us. Her name is Kari Kampakis. She is a well-known author and has done so much great work creating a wealth of wisdom and insights for moms and daughters. And so, Kari, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
For the few people in our audience who don't know about you, would you tell us a little bit about you and your family?
Sure. I am a mom of 4 girls in Birmingham, Alabama, as you can probably tell from my accent. My daughters are ages 15 to 22. So, as we were just talking about beforehand, I've got one who just graduated from college, and she's back in Birmingham for grad school. I've got another daughter, a rising junior in college. My third daughter just graduated from high school, going to Auburn this fall. And then my baby is going into 10th grade. So I have gone from having 4 kids at home to having one child at home this fall.
Is she getting spoiled? Does she like all of the attention, or is she kind of missing having the other sisters to take some of that attention?
Yes, I don't think she's looking too forward to it. She hasn't had the position yet, but I laugh that she and her friends kind of travel in a pack. So we either have 5 of them or none of them. So I suspect that they'll be doing a lot of group activities next year. Yeah, she's not used to having a quiet house with just mom and dad. So
That's amazing.
it'll be an
Well,
adjustment for all of
having
us.
4 girls is a lot of work,
I
especially if
know.
you've got some in college and some headed off to college. So how, in the midst of all that mothering, did you come about writing books and speaking and wanted to share your wisdom with other mamas?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the younger moms that I've met, like you two, I guess you have kind of come along when I'm like 7 or 8 years into this journey. I've been doing it about 10 years. And so I really just did it gradually. And I think that's something that's different about my generation versus the moms behind us, that I think now, even from my daughter's age, I think there's this mentality that, out of college or as a young mom, you got to be a girl boss and just bust it out at the beginning. But my generation, we didn't really do that. At least my friends and I didn't, especially those of us who stayed home. A lot of us, we stayed home and we kind of dabbled just in our spare time. We would do something on the side. So that's really how it started for me. My benchmark is my third daughter because I always loved to write. I had a corporate job writing and doing public relations out of college. And I always said I wanted to write a book one day, but never really did anything about it. And it wasn't until I was pregnant with my third daughter that I realized my mom self-published her book. She had just retired and wanted to write a book. And so I think just seeing my mom do that, I'm thinking, well, if my mom can write a book, maybe I can too. So I started doing some writing conferences with her. And long story short, I wrote fiction books for 7 years, did not know what I was doing. I have 3 books, fiction that will never see the light of day, but I thought they were great at the time, and went through lots of rejection with that. And so, anyway, I just did that on the side when my kids were little. When my husband came home at night and I needed my stress reliever, that was just something I did for myself. And back then we didn't have the internet. I was having to query agents and editors in New York and getting tons of rejection. So it was kind of cool because what I love to do, what opened the door, is something that didn't even exist when I started doing it. When I was writing, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the social media. I didn't have a way to get my work directly to people.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the midst of all that, I had my 4th child. And
Sure.
anyway,
Like, that's when you're drowning, and
right. Yes,
you're writing a
exactly.
book.
Yes, exactly. And I was, she was the biggest surprise, which I'm so thankful now, but I felt like I was just getting my feet back under me. I had 3 kids under the age of 4. That was my hardest year of parenting yet.
Yeah.
Way harder than 3 or 4 teenagers to me. But anyway, so having the 4th, and I just remember thinking, I'll never get to write that book. Like I'll never, catch my breath. But God is so good. And like I said, it was something I had to be very patient with myself in the whole process. And so I was pregnant with her and I just kind of kept writing, but it was around that time that the internet and blogs were starting to get popular.
So
I'd
funny to
started,
say that. That's
I
when the
know,
internet came
I
about.
know. Isn't that funny? I mean, well, the internet existed, but social media, I guess that's when social media blew up, was around that time. And so
And
I started writing.
blogging. That was a
Yes,
whole, yeah, that
that was a
became
whole
a
thing.
thing, was blogging. Because is that where you started?
Yes, I started
Okay.
blogging. And so it was probably, I think it was like 2011, 2012. Had a website. I started blogging, started sharing articles. And I think it was 2013. I had my first article go viral. It was like 10 things young girls should know. It was fun. It was first time anything went viral, and I was having a lot of moms and dads to email me. I'd love for this to be a book. I'd love to give it to my daughter. So I was already thinking that. And then it was about a month later when everything had died down. Everybody had forgotten about my article and moved on to other articles, that I got an email from Thomas Nelson expressing interest in turning that blog post into a book.
Thomas Nelson. And not
I
just like
know.
any but like Thomas Nelson. Did you think it was like spam?
Yes, yes. Especially Thomas Nelson, because I knew exactly who they were. And that was like my dream, to be published by a big company like that. And my life doesn't work like that. It felt like it fell in my lap. But the backstory is I'd been writing, for 7 years, lots of rejection before that. And what I found out later was that they had not had a book for teenage girls in 10 years. And so they were looking for one. They were kind of in the market for one. The girl who ended up being my editor for that book, she's the one that was sent my article by a friend. And so it just spoke to her. She's brought it to her editor. So it was such a God thing. It was something I could not have forced to happen. But anyway, that's really what opened the door. Like I said, I was trying to write fiction. So that really switched my gears to writing nonfiction. And so I wrote 2 books for teenage girls, came out in 2014 and 2016. My daughters weren't even teenagers yet. So, my oldest
You
daughter
were
was
writing about stuff hoping that it was actually going to work when they
Yeah,
got there.
yeah, exactly. And that's what they told me. They're like, we want the target age was 12 through 16. They're like, we want to prepare these girls to have them think about these situations before they're in them. So
Yeah.
it just felt like such a good, alignment with my life, because I was like, well, I want to know this for myself. I don't know what I'm doing about to enter the teenage years with 4 daughters. And so it just opened so many beautiful doors to just have good conversations with other moms and experts and church leaders. And so I wrote those 2 books. Moms would kind of always ask me as I was traveling, when are you going to write a book for us? And I'm just smiling, thinking, never. Moms are hard. I'm not going to write for moms. And so I really had no intention to write for mothers, because my heart was with these teenage girls. But what happened after the second book, I felt like I needed a break. So I was taking a break. In that time, my daughters were becoming teenagers. And so I started kind of butting heads with my oldest, because I didn't know how to parent a teenager, and I was doing all these things wrong, but I didn't realize it at the time. So in the midst of that, I started reading a lot of books, and I didn't know later that would become my research for the third book that would be coming. But I started reading. I was like, how do I parent a teenage daughter while also loving a teenage daughter? And I just spent several years just on that journey, just taking in rather than putting out. And then what came from that was my third book, which was my first book for moms, called Love Her Well, 10 Ways to Find Joy and Connection with Your Teenage Daughter. And that was my favorite book to write, because it was just something I didn't even tell my agent about it. I didn't tell anyone about it. It was just me and God. I was just getting back to my roots. I was like, I don't want to think about sales. I don't want to think about if somebody wants to publish it. Like, I know there's a need for this book, because everything out there was so negative. And every cover that I saw about raising teenage girls would have like an angsty girl on the front,
That's
or
good.
titles like How to Hug a Porcupine, and I'm thinking, if my daughter saw that on my bedside table, they would be like, thanks, Mom. That's not going to help our relationship. So I was like, I know I want a positive tone. I want a positive cover. So at least my daughters would think, well, my mom is trying. They see that
Yeah.
book there.
No,
So
that's good.
yeah, so that book, anyway, so that led to that book, which led to More Than a Mom. And then after that, my most 2 recent books, I released a Devo for teenage girls this past January. That had been on my heart for 5 years. I actually tried to start that Devo after I wrote my 2 girls books in 2014 and 2016, but it wouldn't completely come. And it was in that time that I got the idea for Love Her Well. So I put that on the back burner. Anyway, it was really fun to go write that book again, because at this point I had raised teenage daughters. I had a heart my heart was just different than when I wrote those first two books because I'd lived through it as a mom. So that was really rewarding to write. And we just released that this past January. Um,
Yeah.
and my next book is coming out in September, and it's a book for moms. And it's called Is Your Daughter Ready? 10 Ways to Empower Your Girl for an Age of New Challenges. And so that book is really like, okay, I've been parenting for 22 years. I've been doing this work with moms and daughters for 10 years. I have met thousands of mothers and daughters through my work, through my personal experiences, and just you're always kind of taking it in and learning from people. So I think what would I tell the moms behind me, the 10 things to focus on in those 18 years that your daughter is at home? And as you're launching her, getting her ready for college or the real world, like what are the most important things to focus on, because there are so many distractions and
So
voices out
many.
there.
Yeah.
So that's really the heart behind that book.
Yeah, we're really excited about that one. Well, Carrie girl, you've been cranking them out. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what you got going, it's like
I
you're just
mean,
moving.
it's just ADD brain, it doesn't shut off.
Do you feel like, because you kind of mentioned as you wrote at the beginning that you talked to church leaders and you read a
Mhm.
lot. Was that your main influence for wisdom? Or, as a young mom, did you have anybody that was speaking into you? Were you part of any moms groups or anything like that? Or did you have to go seek it out in other places?
I think that's a great question. Back then, we really didn't have, my generation didn't have all the resources that y'all have now. And when I was growing up, I was a child of the 80s, intentional parenting was not a thing. And
Okay.
so a lot of it, I think my heart for this, my parents did a great job with the big things. I think they instilled faith. They loved us well. Like they did all the big things right. But nobody told me anything about what would be coming up, and I think that's why I have such a heart. I'm like, even going to college, like if somebody had given me a heads up, like
Yes.
I probably could have made some better choices or just would have been a little bit more ready for some things. But yes, I don't know. I think I was just always kind of mentally taking notes. I'm the fourth child in my family. And so when you're the fourth child, you're always observing. You're observing a lot. You're always watching. So I think I kind of grew up doing that. And I was always, watching my older siblings and their friends thinking, well, that didn't turn out well. Well, I want to be like that. You kind of taking notes. So I think I do that with parenting too, that I'm always, and honestly, I've gotten great insight from the experts, from books. I love reading books, from church leaders, but I really think a lot of the best parenting insight that I've gotten is, I think God has given me, and just really Him opening my eyes and my heart to this. But honestly, I feel like the best insight I've gotten has come from other moms. And I think, and a lot of times it's just like I'll have a friend or a mom that I see handle a certain situation a certain way or say something to her child. And I have kind of a good memory for that. And I'm like, that is good parenting.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not the expert and I don't think I'm like all that smart as a mom, but I do think I have a gift. And I think it's just the writer in me for I can kind of pick up on like, that's good parenting or that's a good quote or that's kind of the mom I want to be or the path I want to take. But
That's
but
good.
we're always learning because every generation's different and y'all are facing struggles that we didn't face. And so, but I
I
do
love what
think
you
moms
said
don't give
about
themselves credit.
being a writer and picking up those they're like one-liners, they're things that you
Yes.
kind of grab onto. I've noticed that especially with your social posting. You
Mm-hmm.
have so many things that I'm like, I could remember that. Like that phrase catches
Yes.
me. Because
Yes.
sometimes things get so wordy that you're like, I'm never going to remember to do all these steps. So I
Right.
agree. I think you have a knack for just these really easy to remember liners for moms.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just curious, you mentioned a couple of times, like, well, that was that point of my mothering, and then my mothering shifted. Do
Yes.
you think by the fourth daughter that you had kind of like refined your mothering to be like, okay, now I've got this, I know what I'm doing?
Yeah, I think that I'm not so caught off guard and surprised that there are certain, I mean, like I said, every child is different, every class is different, every generation is different. But there are certain things that I know this is going to start happening in middle school. I know this is going to start happening in high school. But what you don't know is your child and their friend group or their class dynamic. So that's what's always different. But I do think, I think with the youngest, you've kind of seen how things work out too. with, like, when you have older kids, and that's the benefit. And I think that's the benefit of talking to moms with older kids, that, and for example, I had one daughter that was so close with this childhood friend. Like, in my head, I'm thinking they're going to be college roommates. They're going to be best friends forever, all of this. And then in 7th grade, they just kind of parted ways. And there wasn't bad blood, but it broke my heart because I was close with the mom. They were like so tight as kids. My kids were always over at their house. And so it just felt like a real loss. And I was so sad. And there was that part of me, especially as a young mom, I wanted to force their friendship. And I see so many moms in that position because you're so scared and you're so sad. And you're like, no, you're supposed to be college roommates and friends forever. But, just some prayer and some thought, I realized I was like, I can't do that. I can't force their friendships. And so anyway, like I said, no bad blood, but they barely talked for several years. And I talk about this in the new book. But what happened was they explored other friendships. The summer before senior year, they ended up coming back together. And, the mom called. We were doing senior trip. The mom asked, hey, could we go on senior trip with you? I was like, of course. So they came back together senior year. They had the best experience, the best friend group. It was actually the year after COVID. So a lot of things were shut down, but they had almost like a magical senior year. It was just a great group of girls and guys. And on senior trip, I remember the girl's mom just looking at me. We're watching our daughters, and she's like, I am so glad they found each other again. And I said, me too. And it had nothing to do with us. It was just on their time. And they're still great friends. They visited each other in college. And I think, if I had tried to force it, like we do sometimes when we panic when our kids are little, then might have prevented this long-term friendship. They are going to be forever friends. And I might have prevented that if I was forcing something to happen that wasn't meant to happen. So I think that's kind of what you realize as you have parented a few. You're like, if something's a real friendship or real relationship, they're going to find their way back to each other.
That's so good.
And I'm always telling mine, like, don't burn bridges. If people come back into your life, boys and girls, like, if you can possibly just, don't act on every emotion. And I see so many, even kind of young moms sometimes, and like these girls behind me, that they like just, protecting their peace and cutting off friendships, and everybody's toxic. And, I tell girls, like, some girls, maybe there is a toxic situation, but you don't have to go announce it. You don't have to go tell a girl, my mom says you're toxic and we can't be friends. But there's this mentality now, these girls coming up, like, they think they need to be honest and authentic. And I'm like, no, sometimes you just need to quietly pull back, go focus on other relationships, pray, give it to God, and just be patient, because you don't know what he's going to do.
That's good.
So I think that's the main thing that you realize when you've parented for a while, is like, this is just a moment in time, and it's not a predictor of how things are going to be 10 or 20 years from now.
That's so good. Okay, so I'd love to double click on the, because you kind of talked about how we talk to the girls about it, but I think something that we see, we both are girl moms and boy moms. So interestingly, like with my son is my first, so I've never had another mom, and I haven't been in group chats with moms of the boys. I'm just not, we're not in any. The boys like work it out,
right.
Very different than with the daughter. There are several group chats going. The moms are all very involved in the plans, and what are we wearing? When are we getting there? Okay, so it's just completely different dynamics, right?
Yes.
And to your point, I think what we see sometimes is moms maybe not necessarily handle it the greatest when the girls aren't getting along, and then the moms get involved.
Right.
And so how have you handled that well? What would you tell a mom who's, her daughter is not getting along with this other girl's daughter, and we're starting to get texts of screenshots of, okay, what do we do?
Yes. I think there's something to be said. I think sometimes we know too much and we get too involved. And so, one thing I just encourage moms to do is just imagine you at your age and your friendships. Imagine if your mom was always meddling in your friendships and telling you, why are you not friends with Samantha? Why are you not friends with Jane? And so I just think that obviously there are times when we do need to get involved. There are times when I think, but I'm just a big believer in saving that for when it really counts and really matters. And so, with mine, I think the best advice, and I tell girls this all the time, is like, to hold your friends loosely, like a real friend. You're not going to have to force those friendships. And I have a mom that, described this. She said, and I think especially, often in nice communities where there's a lot of great parents, but moms maybe have extra time to do this. She's like, I see a lot of moms live in that state of preservation and fear, because the girls, and I know it, like when your daughter has found a great group and you love the moms, you're like, this is so perfect. And you're so happy. So anything that changes in there, it can really make us panic because, I don't want this to change. And so she's like, I think a lot of moms that they buy tickets to concerts or plan a vacation to try to force these girls together. And we were talking about it once, like, sometimes you just have to let it go and you just have to trust. And there might be shifts and changes, but there's freedom on the other side. And it really is about like trusting it to God and not trying to control the situation. Because sometimes even we as adults, sometimes we just grow apart from a friend. And, so I've had girls, my daughters have been on both sides of it where, they're growing apart from a friend. And I think maybe they're the one pulling away a little bit more. They don't feel like they have as much in common. And then they've been on the side where maybe they're wanting to be friends with somebody and they're not paying them as much attention because they found another friend. Yeah. And so I think as moms, it's really easy to get involved and get emotional or get upset. What I see a lot too is especially when the moms are friends and they have a long friendship, they can really get upset. And just to give an example, I just don't think it ends well when we act on our emotions and get involved in those situations. I think sometimes we got to really go take it to God, take it to our mom, take it to a mentor, kind of take our heartache and our pain to somebody besides that person first, so that if we do feel like a conversation is needed, we can be measured and calm. Because, what I see a lot of moms do is try to attack the other mom, or your daughter did this, or your daughter said this. And, I think if any mom acts like her daughter's an angel and somebody else's child is a villain, the automatic instinct that everybody's loyalty is with their child. I don't care how good of friends you are. Your loyalty is going to be with your child. And you never know that maybe the child is being a little pill, like maybe the child isn't being kind to her friends. But you don't know what that mom is struggling with. Maybe the mom knows that. She sees that her daughter has some mean tendencies, but she can't go share that with her mom friends. Like she's praying about it and working on it and trying to help her daughter's heart. Like you don't know what's going on in somebody's home. But I got an email once, and I get a number of emails like this sometimes from the moms behind me, is that, I had this friend for 20 years. She's always been a good friend to me. Our daughters are friends, did everything together. 6th or 7th grade, the daughters kind of, drift apart. A lot of times they've made cheerleader or team and they're finding other friends. And the daughter was so hurt. Anyway, all this happened. And so, but a lot of times the daughter finds other friends, they kind of find a place, but the mom is still upset. Not with the girl, but with the mom, because the mom let it happen. Right. And a lot of times they cut off their friendship. I've had, cut off their friendship with the mom. And I'm like, you know what? That's not from God. And I know we've all been there. We've all had that temptation to do that. But I'm always reminding myself, the Greek word for devil is diablos, and it means the one who divides. Yeah. And so sometimes when I feel myself feeling division with people because of heartache or pain, that I'm like, the enemy wants me to hate them, wants me to write them off, wants me to, cut off that relationship. And so I think that's really when we have to just pray through it and say, God, you tell me. I can't control what anybody else does, but help us act with integrity to here. Help me and my daughter behave in a way that we won't regret in 5 or 10 years, so we don't say something we regret. Wow. And I just think that's not said enough, that we just sometimes we have to just be quiet and not act on every emotion like we're tempted to.
Well, I love what you said. You use this word panic. And I think that is so relatable for moms, because there's so many times in motherhood where something happens that you didn't expect and you panic. Right. I always felt like as a young mom that I was supposed to know what to do. Like, well, I'm the mother in the situation. I'm supposed to know what to do. And I love that you said that's kind of a pitfall to avoid. Like, don't panic and then make a rash decision that's going to come back to bite you. Yes. What other pitfalls do you think mamas fall into in raising these teenage daughters, where you're like, you should just take a minute? Yes. Don't jump to conclusions.
Yeah. Something I heard, I had a Texas event, and I loved this idea. This woman was talking about, we're talking about not acting on your emotions, basically taking time, going to God, and, getting yourself in a calm place before you go write that email or send that text or whatever it is. And she was telling me that in her daughter's theater group, they have a 24-hour rule. And she goes, I cannot tell you how many times this rule has saved me, because what happens is, your daughter is given her part, but you don't know anybody else's part. All you have to know is your daughter's part. And for 24 hours, you can't tell anybody. You can't go, talk to a friend. You just have to keep this and kind of sit on it for 24 hours. And so she's like, this past time, my daughter was put in the ensemble again. And she was very frustrated because she's like, she deserves a lead role. Fine. She's been in the ensemble so many times. And she was laughing because she's like, my daughter had to talk me off the ledge, because I was ready to send an email. I was ready to pull her out of the theater group. And my daughter's like, please, Mom, please don't do this. Like, I'll never get a lead role if you do it. I'm okay with being on the ensemble. But the mother wasn't. She goes, I was just seeing red. I was so mad. But, she had to wait 24 hours. She slept on it. She's like, the next day, I was in a much calmer place and a much better place to respond. And I thought that is just such a great example of, like, if we could all just give ourselves that 24-hour rule, that just wait before you just go respond to that. I one time got an email, from somebody that I thought I was friends with, and I guess I'd hurt them in ways that I hadn't even realized, but it was a really ugly email. And I was like, my instinct was I wanted to respond right back. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go just like dish it back. I need to calm down. So I was praying about it, and I just felt God telling me, instead of just sitting in that hurt, there was another email that I've been meaning to send to somebody to tell them how much their work meant to me. And just positive, like, how much, their work uplifted me. And so I was like, in response to that email, I'm going to go respond. I'm going to go write this email that I've been meaning to write anyway. And that was just for me to get my heart in a better position. And so I think anything we can do like that as moms, and especially you have to know, because there are certain friends when you're mad, like if I want somebody to be mad at me and to rev me up, I need to call that friend. But that might not be, the best solution to those situations.
So, you mentioned earlier that when you wrote a book, you wanted to have a more positive spin on it, because there is kind of this trope or idea of this prickly relationship between moms and daughters.
Yes.
Where do you think that comes from? How can we get over that?
Yeah, I don't know. It was funny when I was researching that book, and I don't know if this would still be the case. I Googled mothers and teenage daughters, and it was so sad what pulled up. I mean, everything's toxic, fighting. And even in doing that book, I've had a lot of dads tell me, like, oh, my wife and my daughter could have used this book. So I don't know what it is. I can say that, my daughters and I are probably more prone to butt heads than they are with their dad. It's a different relationship. But the way I have come to look at it is I think we have it in our head that it's always supposed to be smooth sailing. But any long-term relationship, you're going to have some tensions. And so I think one thing that we're not told enough is the importance of repair. And that was something I never really learned growing up, that, I didn't learn to go back and apologize. I didn't learn. If my sisters and I got in a fight, we didn't speak for 3 days. And then when we started speaking, it was assumed to be over, but we never learned to own up to our part, to recognize our part. And so that was something I had to learn with my daughter, and that's what inspired me to write Love Her Well, is like, I sat on it. I'm like, this doesn't feel good. We just keep drifting further and further apart, and I keep blaming her. And if I don't do something, I'm going to lose my relationship with her. And so I always tell moms, like, it is hard to take that hit. It's hard to realize that about ourselves, but it does not hurt as much as losing a connection with our child would. It is always worth it. And so I think that ability to repair, and the way I look at it too, is that, if we teach our daughters to repair, sometimes there might be something with another mom or another daughter, and we've got to go repair, or there needs to be a conversation. And if we can learn to have that skill and teach our daughters to do it, then it's going to set them up to win in life and every relationship. Even in marriage, I think it's John Gottman. He's like America's #1 couples therapist. He said the #1 predictor of success in marriage is how well a couple can repair. And so I saw this written somewhere, with your daughter or your child, if you can look at that when you're having these arguments, at 15, 16, they can say hurtful things. They're not used to, they don't know how to always filter their words. And so they're learning on mom, right? And it can be very hurtful. But if we can teach them, like, don't talk to me like that. Like, I understand you're upset, but we can teach them how to argue well, or how to express themselves with not being so hurtful, and just see this is a normal part of the relationship. And as they learn that skill with us, like, we can disagree, we can kind of butt heads, but we're going to still love each other, and we're not going to be mean or ugly about it. And if they can learn that with us, then they can take that into their marriage. They can take that into the workplace, their friendships. And so then I think it becomes a positive, like we're actually getting some learning opportunities, not only for ourselves and for them. But going back to the other mom, I think sometimes I've seen moms do this well, like say two girls are not getting along and one girl does something. The moms who I think handle these situations best are the ones who realize that their daughters are not angels, And so a lot of times what they do is they approach the mom like, hey, can I talk to you about something? It's like, I don't know what's going on with our girls. It makes me sad because I feel like, I don't know, maybe something, they're drifting apart. I don't know if Sarah has done something, if my child has done something, please let me know. I think something happened at the Halloween party last week. I think her feelings were hurt because Amanda did this, but she might've done something too. Like, I think those are the moms that I see usually have the best results is when they kind of go into it. Like, I don't want to get too involved, but I just want them to be on good terms. I don't know what we need to do to help them, but just recognizing that it's not always one person's fault. That sometimes their child might have had a role or something might have happened. And the other thing that I think is so crucial for moms to do, and I tell girls this all the time, is to I'm like, cast a wide net. And that's something I've learned from parenting several girls, like have a lot of different friendships, have your, especially in middle school, because things shift so much. And so many girls, they just paint themselves into a corner because they only have this little group of friends. And then something happens and they're out, or there's something shifts or whatever, and they have nowhere to go because those are the only friends they have. But I'm like, it's okay to have your best friends. But, when you're in French class, have your French class friends, have your PE friends, have your church friends, have your camp friends, like always have other people. And if you've got these other places to go, if your friends do hurt you or these things happen, you've got other places to turn.
Yeah.
So I just think that's so important.
I think that's so appropriate for our day and time because we're living in a society where there are so many different opinions that you're constantly potentially disagreeing with someone. And we're trying to teach our girls how to repair relationships in such a way that you don't have to say, I agree with you. But you can say, I love you because I see who you are as who God made you. And I think that might be what your new book is going to kind of point to, is this idea that we have to raise girls that know how to handle themselves in a dark world where not everybody's going to say, I'm sorry, and not everybody's going to play nice. And sometimes if you just like let people walk all over you, you'll end up in a really bad place. How do we teach our girls to stand up for themselves and their beliefs, but also create those relationships in life that really are like, I see you, I respect you, I may not agree with you, but we can live in the same world together.
Yes. I think something that girls struggle with, especially sweet little Christian girls, is I'm supposed to love everybody.
Right.
And you are. Well, I'm like, we are called to love everybody, but there are different levels of love. Just because you love somebody doesn't mean you give them complete access to your life. Just because you're loving, I was like, there are some people that you love up close and personal because they're trustworthy, they're good for you, they've proven that. And there are some people that you love at an arm's distance. You're kind and you're friendly, but you stick to like, let's talk about SEC football. Let's talk about homecoming. Like you don't invite them to spend the night at your house. You're not answering their nosy questions because there are certain people, even as adults, I'm like, I'm going to be very guarded with what I share with her because I know she might use it against me. Like you have to be smart. And like I said, that's where I see a lot of sweet little Christian girls get tripped up. And also tell girls, you don't have to go announce it. You don't have to go tell them, my mom says you're toxic and we can't be friends anymore. Like, there's a way to like, you can still be kind, but you're setting boundaries with that person. You're not calling them as much. You're not investing in that relationship. You're looking at other relationships. But yeah, that's something I talk about in the new book because it's tricky. And I think there's kind of an irony in raising girls because when they're little, at least here in the South, I'm like, I took mine to etiquette classes and you're teaching them to be kind and be a light and all the fun things to talk about, right? The fruit of the Holy Spirit. But then, they start getting to middle school and high school and I'm like, eyes in the back of your head, especially going to college, trust nobody, love many, trust few, be very careful who you trust. And like, trust is earned not over a weekend or a spring break trip. Like it takes time to see somebody's character and that's okay. You just need to be discerning and know, when somebody's good for you or when they're not good for you. But for parents, we need to know that too, that I'm like, I have a friend that I asked one time when my oldest was turning 16. I'm like, give me some advice when your child turns 16. He's like, when your child turns 16, that whole concept of God's free will really kicks in, and it does. None of us know what our kids will do or what situations they might be in. But I tell girls, like, you might start the night in a totally innocent place, but the
Yeah.
reason friends matter so much, because when you're 16 and your parents aren't taking you places, somebody might know, oh, my friend's having this party over here. You might end up somewhere you never intended to be because of the people that you're hanging around, just because of the company you keep. And so I just think it's really important for us to teach our kids, like, you want to be a light, but be prepared for the darkness, and trust your gut, know about discernment. And that's how God speaks to us a lot. And I think as moms too, what I'm learning is, yes, I hope my kids will listen to me, but even more important than them listening to me is them learning to listen to God's voice inside of them, and that, especially as they leave home, like, I'm not going to be there, he is going to be there, but you need to learn to tune into your gut and that quiet intuition and have friends who are doing the same.
Yeah.
But of course, sometimes they have to learn these lessons the hard way, and, they're going to make mistakes. But I do think, like I said, I think that the great thing about being, the sweet little Christian girls who've been loved well, like, that's what we want for our kids. It's a great childhood. But in some ways, I think it's hard for them to understand what the real world is like, because
Mhm.
they've been surrounded by trustworthy people. And so it's really important to have those conversations about what healthy relationships look like, what unhealthy relationships look like, just so when they see it, they're like, oh, I think that's what my mom was talking about.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, they get the gentle part, but not the shrewd part, where
Yes.
it talks to us about it. And so that we make sure that we're that as moms that we're preparing them for both, because as
Hmm.
women, we do tend to be social people pleasers. We don't want to, but if
Yes.
but if we are going to stand strong and survive in this world, we have to be both gentle and shrewd. We have to have
Yes.
both of those pieces.
Definitely.
Carrie, thank you so much. You are so full of wisdom. We
Thank you.
cannot wait to get your new book, Is Your Daughter Ready? Thank you for all the time that you have put into preparing that, all the work you do too on your social for our Gather Moms community. If you aren't following Carrie, go give her a follow. She
Thank you.
drops truth bombs on the regular over on her Instagram feed, and so you don't want to miss those. Well, and
Thank you.
Carrie, because we're in mom's ministry, we lead a lot of mom things. So it's always nice for us when we can talk to a mom that's a little bit ahead of us and glean
Yeah.
wisdom from her, because we are still trying to figure out raising these babies in our home too. So if nothing else, I just want you to know from a mom looking ahead at you, thank you so much for doing it well and for
Thank
sharing
you.
both your struggles and your wins, so that those of us that are coming along behind can feel encouraged that it is possible to raise these teenagers and send them off into the world.
Thank you. Well, I love this conversation. I could talk to y'all all day. And any advice for me, anything that you see moms struggling with or wanting more guidance with, just in what you're doing through your work?
I think it's just what you talked about is you talked about you learn the most from other moms.
Hmm.
And we're just seeing, moms are lacking true community. Yeah.
Mm.
So they're learning from other moms on TikTok, on Instagram,
Oh, got
but
it.
not over coffee.
Yes.
So something that we really push, and that's why, our Gather Moms groups are such a big deal, is because it really happens when you sit across from another mom and you say, my toddler keeps throwing his sippy cup, across the room, and the other mom goes, oh, mine did that. Here's what
Yeah.
I did,
Yes.
and you go, oh, well, the internet didn't tell me that. No, the internet's not going to tell you that. You have
Right.
to be in community with other moms talking about things. And, I think the
So
tricky
good.
thing is then moving into the teenage years, because
Yes.
I do think what we have noticed, especially as we've transitioned to that space,
Hmm.
is moms feel a little more free to talk about their toddlers throwing tantrums than their
Right.
teenagers having trauma. Yeah.
Right.
And so when your teenager is going through something really dark and hard,
Right.
then it can become, I think you even isolate more because
Yes.
people know them, and also they're their own person.
Right.
But our hope is that if you do have those mom friendships, then when that stuff
Mhm.
does happen, you can just reach out to that one girl. And
Yes.
she, like Rebecca's done for me, can come sit on
Yes.
my porch and let me cry.
Yes.
And so you're not necessarily talking about those things on a park bench. You're talking about it in maybe a little bit more of a secluded setting.
Yes.
We have to have it. We have to be talking about these things and not let what you talked about Satan doing, divide and isolate.
Yeah, that's
Because
so
that's
good.
where we struggle.
And I think about that too, when and it's really what grows your relationships is asking those questions and needing help. Because, when my generation, when we first had babies, when I had a question like that, or if I needed a recipe, I would call my sister or my sister-in-law. And you don't realize how bonding those little 5-minute phone calls are, or
Absolutely.
your little small group. And so, but now there's all the expert advice in the world out on the internet. And so I think people are missing out on those little interactions that really help you build that community. Might not seem important, but it is those little moments. You're talking about a recipe, but then all of a sudden you get advice on temper tantrums or whatever it is in that
Yes.
same conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think too, with moms in the teenage years, your parenting starts to go different directions.
Yes.
Even Christian parents start making
Yes.
choices that are different than yours. And it's hard to kind of figure out how to relate to each other sometimes when you feel like your kids are allowed to do
Yes.
different things. And so these
Right.
women that you've done life with all this time, you're like, oh, but I would never let my kid do that.
Yes.
So you're
Yes.
trying to, what you talked about, repair relationships where you go, okay, I hope that works out for you.
Right.
You're
Right.
making different choices as your kids are entering, launching phase,
Yeah.
basically.
And I think that's where the casting the wide net comes in really handy for moms, because there were so many moms that I was kind of acquaintances with, maybe when our kids were 8th or 9th grade. But what you realize in the teen years, like, you're kind of looking around like, we're parenting similarly. And so somebody that was maybe an acquaintance might become a close friend or an ally 2 or 3 years later as you realize that you share the same values.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
All right, Kari, thank
Okay.
you so much.
Yes, thank
Loved
you.
having this conversation with you. Gather Moms, we love you. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, y'all.